Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Vern and Richard Show. This episode of the Vern and Richard Show is me getting triggered by posts on LinkedIn. People having a pop at software testing, and I'm just baffled and confused. Like, why? You are generally somewhat sensible.
Yeah.
Why are you saying this? And so we talk about that, and Rich has some, devil's advocate. Is he being a devil's advocate? Does he actually believe these things? I don't know. Listen to find out. So we explore the thing that triggered me, which is testing a specialism, and then we get into how AI impacts that conversation and how AI is going to impact the role going forwards, and maybe not just our role, but all the roles. So it's an interesting conversation. Please, for the love of all that's good and holy, could you please reply and share your thoughts on this question, for my sake, if for nothing else, because I would like to know what people are thinking about this topic. Yeah, I think you will enjoy it. So the thing that's bugging me this week is, and I'll include all the links to the things that I'm referring to. So there's a dude that I'm connected. Have we not said hello? Hello.
Hi,
There's
everyone.
a dude.
Welcome. Carry on, Vernon.
Oh yeah. So welcome. Yeah. Vern Show episode. It's Good Friday. We should record anyway. Whatever. I saw a post from a dude on LinkedIn who has some really interesting takes about software development, and often has some interesting takes about testing. So his latest one, if my very terrible machine will let me. So his latest one that's been on my mind for the past few weeks is, it says, PSA, testing is not a specialism. Thank you for your time. And I was just, yeah, the end, mic drop, walk off stage, right. And I kind of feel okay. Curious, because I just wanted, it's one of these things where you just make a declaration and then bounce, which is great, but I didn't know why. And this dude, his name is Paul Hammond. He has a lot of opinions about stuff. So I knew he thought, and if you look at his posts, you can tell that he has rationale behind the things that he's saying. It's just with this kind of declarative mic drop post, you don't get that because that's the style of the post. So I just replied saying, basically, huh? Like, can you elaborate, please? And there was another dude who replied +1ing the post. So there's another guy called Greg Munt, who I'm also connected to, and he, if I'm understanding his experience properly, he's got some substantial experience with software testing, and is now more in the leadership space. I think he's like a consultant or something. But anyway, he's got a lot of experience, a lot of different things. So I replied to both of them in my own reply, saying, "Can you explain why, like, how you arrived at this conclusion?" Because I've asked this question before and I didn't really get an answer that, I'm still don't have an answer. And so I referred them to a post that I made ages ago, like way into last year. And I'm paraphrasing, like I say, all the links will be in the show notes. But my question is, why is it when we say developers should know front-end engineering and we go, actually, we should spin that out into its own thing because that's pretty, do you know what I mean? Intense cognitive load. It's like, okay, cool. What about SRE? Yeah, that should definitely be its own thing as well. So that gets spun out into its own thing. You probably see where I'm going with this, right? And then you've got platform engineering, which is similar to SRE, but not the same. But still, that needs to be its own thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a whole different episode, but definitely we need to spin that out into its own thing. What else did I say? I said a bunch of stuff. But as soon as you say testing, it's like, oh, absolutely not. Like, testing, that's trivial. And it's not even
anyone's job.
But the thing I find interesting, it's the way that people reply to that. The thought of testing being a specialism is literally laughable to these dudes and others. That's testing a specialism. How ridiculous! I'm like, okay. I mean, cool. I'm not even getting angry, like, because whatever, I don't really care in terms of getting angry, but I do care about the quality of the assertion. Irony, quality. The quality of the assertion seems to be minimal. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't. Where are the oracles, if you like, if you want to put test?
Oh,
What is it?
oracles. Oof. You a
What?
testing
What?
specialist.
No, no. Well, clearly not. I don't know. But what? How did you arrive at that conclusion? That's the thing I'm curious about.
Yeah.
So Greg, to be fair to him, sent me a post that he also made some months ago, and I'm pretty sure it's the post that, like, I reached out to connect with him. And what I remember about the post is I didn't agree with everything in the post, but I just liked the fact that he was engaging with people's criticism. I thought, well, that works for me. And that's someone I would like to connect with, because at least they want to have a conversation. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so when I asked him how he arrived at this conclusion, he just gave me a link to that post, which I repeat, put in the show notes. But I don't feel like it's answering my question. So I've shared it with Rich, and Rich, I don't know. I get the impression that he might agree, or maybe he doesn't agree, or it's caveats. But we thought we would talk about it today because I am none the wiser, sadly.
Okay. Well, I've got both these links, but before we go into those links, because I've just noticed something about the two links that you've sent me as well. One of the reasons why
Sorry, there's one more link that I shared with Rich, and that's a link that I got from one of my teammates at work. So he was like, we've been talking about quality and how the QA team should be working and this and the other. And then right after that, he sent me this link to a post by a guy called Jade Rubik. Absolutely incredible last name. And his post is called Should QA Exist? And it has some, similarities in perspective and ethos, whatever, with the stuff that Paul shared on LinkedIn, stuff that Greg has shared on LinkedIn. I shared that with Rich. All of this I've shared with Rich. I said, hey, these things are on my mind. We should talk about them. All right, now I'm definitely going to shut up. Stop monologuing, man.
Well, the immediate thing that came to my mind was why do they possibly think this, right? And the first answer that I got was, I've met some pretty bad testers. And when I say bad, I mean bad in the sense of, I would consider myself a good tester, right? I can explore apps on many layers. I don't really need requirements. I can just start testing. I know loads of tools, mnemonics, techniques. I've got a bunch of knowledge that I can use to apply. However, a lot of testers that I've worked with can't test without requirements. Mostly only tend to do the happy path, ask very basic questions. So I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, right? But what I'm saying is, a lot of testers, maybe not nowadays, because that's one of the things I'm pondering. Has this opinion been formed a long time ago, and now they're just so biased they don't see good testing? Early at the start of my career, I'm how many years in now? 18 years, 17 years into testing, and it was just, this is the story. Think of a happy path, think of a negative path, write a test case. And there was very little critical thinking done at all. And I still believe that people are in those kind of roles. So I know they are. I see them in some of the projects I'm on. So when you see that little effort put into testing, surely you're going to doubt that it should exist. I know that's a bit strong to say it's not a specialism, but has their opinion been formed a long time ago and they're just biased by it?
Could be, but you don't really. Or so far, if I'm thinking about these two specific individuals, and I think I've got way more chance of, going back and forth with Greg, because he showed that in the past, that he's at least has an amount of energy that he wants to have on this conversation. I wouldn't say it's particularly as much as I would like to have, but I'm gonna go back to him in the DMs. But yeah, that explanation could be true, and it's a perspective that I shared with people in the past, where people have, in some way, shape, or form, communicated some disparaging ideas about testing, and so my usual reaction, like with this, is to be curious about how did they arrive at that conclusion. So their experience is different to mine. Have they worked with, some non-expert testers or some, people who don't take it as seriously, and then that's informed their opinion. That is one explanation.
So
but I
the
don't know
next
if
thing that
that's what
comes,
their experience is.
yeah, I don't know either. But one
Because I
question I
feel,
would love to ask
I'll
them
be
now.
honest, real quick, I'll be honest. I think they don't care whether it's you or, dreadful tester Jones.
Yeah.
See what I mean? They don't they don't care. I feel like what they mean is, I don't care whether you're talking about a Bradshaw or, someone who's terrible
Jones.
at testing.
Sorry, Jones. Whoever you are, Jones.
I can't say Jones because I just thought of Angie, and that's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Smith, unidentified terrible tester person, right?
Adam Smith. We can't give Adam Smith a hard time, can we?
Who's Adam Smith?
Was that not his name? I feel like his name was Adam
know.
Smith. Anyway,
even if they'd worked with you, I get the impression that they would still be promoting this idea of testers, not a specialism, they're useless. Maybe they didn't say useless, but we shouldn't have them on the team.
How would you respond? How do you think they would respond to the question of, well, given that we now have coding agents, isn't everyone a developer? Like we don't need developers. Developing is no longer a specialism. Perhaps it was.
I think they will disagree strongly
because they know what good development looks like, and they know.
I have no idea beyond they are developers. That's all I've got really, because I don't know them well. I'd love to, like I said, I'd love to sit and chat with them about this. So this is the best I've got.
We said we were going to do guest posts. Maybe we need a guest. We need to get Paul or Greg or both on the pod. And,
I would be up for it. I'd be up for it. It'd be great to get them to expand on what they mean, because there's no way that these two folks just woke up and just said, "Oh, I think that testing is not a specialism, or we shouldn't have testers on the team," or etc. etc. They've gone. Yeah. They have had some experiences that have caused them to go, you know what, my conclusion is we don't, this. It's just they don't talk about that as much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, man. But I still don't have an answer, and I would like one. If I think, I mean, I could. I was meant to do this before, but I'll do it now. The classic, what does the definition say in a dictionary? I don't know.
But while you're doing that, though, I still think what you said is right, that they would think that about development regardless, right?
Oh yeah.
But basic testing, which was a lot of people's jobs for a long time, did not really require much specialism, right? Like developers should have been doing a lot of it. Now it's got more complicated because systems have got more complicated. You can add automation into the mix, the cloud, everything got more complicated. And just to play devil's advocate, I think it is a specialism, right? I really do. But in some contexts, you don't need to be very good at it to provide value, right? The testing that's being done in some contexts is so basic that it would come across like it's not taking skill.
I make that argument all the time. So I agree with that, but the problem is that isn't what I'm talking about.
I know you're not, yeah.
So I'm
but
trying to.
It's got the same name, Vernon. It's got the same name.
We shall put the link to that episode at the bottom. The thing is, maybe because I'm a tester, I don't know. Maybe because I'm a knowledge worker more broadly, but I feel like I can come up with possible explanations for how they arrived at that conclusion. Yeah. That's not what's difficult. The thing is, that's all me imagining possibilities instead of hearing directly from them. I've got reams and reams of talk. One of the favorite talks that I've done, which I should probably propose to do to other conferences, is basically about the mistakes that we make as testers when it comes to communicating our value. And I did this the last time I did this talk. In fact, it might be the only time I've done this talk was at the Grey Test conference last year in Switzerland. I don't know if it's happening this year. I don't think it is. But it wasn't recorded. But I do have the slides. So I can go and give this talk again easily. But in there, I talk about, here are all the things that, as a profession, we have done and in some places continue to do that lend themselves to opinions like Paul's, Greg's, and others who say, oh, testing, not sure it's given the value that we think it could give. We're not sure it's a specialism in the way that you seem to think it's specialism, dear tester.
Okay.
And there's a level of disparagement as well, which I also just directly dislike, regardless of how you got to the conclusion. That is disrespectful. There's a level of disrespectful energy that I can feel coming back, and you can see that in the comments to Paul's post, maybe even to Greg's post, but I definitely remember it in Paul's post where it's almost. This is why I said in my replies, it's almost laughable to some people that you would say, "Oh yeah, testing is a specialism." People like testing, whatever. Oh, that's interesting.
You reminded me of my old one of my old talks about the tester developer relationship, and I'm just trying to think back to the 10 points that are in there, and maybe another part of this, because we've said this on the pod several times, that again maybe it's still true, but I'm going to say historically, but probably still true. Testers are not very good at talking about testing.
That's literally what I just said.
Explaining that value. So then you get measured in bugs. Bugs are perceived to be very negative, which would, also help shape this dislike of a role or a skill or a specialism. You're like, that is a massive part of the problem. I think that we're not very good at talking about testing or showing other people the skills that we are using, because we mostly communicate in bugs. Here's some bugs. Happy days. God damn you, Richard. Why are you ruining our week? What? I've just done some great skilled testing. Yeah, but now you're giving me all this extra work to do.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'll fix them myself, right? Because I'm a development's easy. It's not a specialism. I can fix my own bugs. So shots fired. But yeah, I think there's a bit of everything to it, and I would not be surprised. And who knows if this pod will still be around in many, many years' time. But I wonder if we will see that debate with, as mentioned before, with developers, and the fact that we now have coding agents and other things, and
that's
not saying I don't think we should have it now, because I'm using these agents every day, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't know how to develop, I would be getting trash out of these things. But maybe in 5 years' time.
But the thing is, that's almost making my argument for me. So, do these people have agents that do or do not consider testing in their, scope of work? So when the planning agent is figuring out how to do a thing, is testing ever part of the plan?
In my plans, yeah.
Right. And I suspect it would be in a developer who has the same perspective as Paul.
Yeah.
Then my next follow-up question, which is, a little bit leading, apologies. Is it possible for an agent to do a good job or a bad job of testing? Or do they just always do a good job?
Yes. No, yes to the previous question. Good and bad, right? It depends how good you ask it.
So if you want them to get better, is that possible? Or is, because it's not a specialism, you don't know how to do that?
Well, that's
where my brain goes straight. I'm just like, well...
Wait. If you wanted them to get better, you would create a skill so that your agent had specialist skills.
You're making my argument for me. Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
We're both in agreement. We know. anyone listening to this will know we believe it's a specialism, right? But like how those opinions are formed, and it is a shared. This is not the first time I've heard such arguments. I've been on teams where they don't, they
Yeah,
downplay my value and role, and then I have to fight against that. I've
yeah,
seen tens and tens of conference talks where people are fighting for their value and to be heard and to be appreciated. So I get why the view exists, and I get it as well because, again, even if a developer should be doing testing, they would have to learn the skills in order to do it. So regardless of whether it's a role, and I think often the crossover is it's a role, right? That's the crossover. The actual technique or the
that's a
activity of
conflation that
testing,
makes no sense.
yeah,
It's
or a
like saying, it's like
performance.
my even before AI, my response to this kind of thing is, it's you made this point at the start of it, so I'm kind of repeating it, but I reframe it in non-software testing terms like this. I'll say, do you have a cook at your house? Do you have your own personal chef? Most of us
No.
would say no. But if I then said, oh, well, that means you're not taking cooking very seriously, does it? Because you don't have you'd think I was an idiot. You know what I mean? You think I was like, what do you mean? Just because I don't have a cook, there's no cooking occurring in the house? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But I said, have you got a cleaner? No. Well, you're not taking cleaning very seriously, are you? Like, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. The activity and the skill and the skill is not the same question as, do you need that role in the team? And that's a conflation. Like, if they're trying to say, because you don't always need a tester on the team, that means it's not a specialism. I think that's a complete and utter confusion and conflation of what those two things are, personally, because they're not the same. They're
And
not the
I've
same thing.
used that. They're not at all. I've used that analogy before of the chef and cooking, right? Because people ask me, like, do I like cooking? I say I'm a very good cook, right? If you give me a
Mm.
recipe, I am a very good cook. I am a mediocre chef. I can make meals from absolutely nothing, but my repertoire is bad. I don't remember half of the things that I've done before that I should know. And I'm not um like, I wouldn't classify myself as a chef. But back to that point about people doing testing, I don't need to be a chef because my context is feeding myself, and I will eat pretty much anything you give me. Right. So I don't have to
Yeah,
be very good at it. I don't have to. I'm not a specialist cook. I'm a good enough cook,
right.
but I'm not, I wouldn't, I probably, but I have learned a few, really good dishes that, probably would be viewed as specialisms by somebody else. But
Hmm.
overall, I'm a basic cook. But that doesn't remove the fact that other people want to be really good at cooking and they want to be professionals and they want to be great chefs. And therefore, it doesn't stop it being a specialism. It just means sometimes you don't need to be that doesn't need to be that special, like
The context
to provide
will
value.
drive that.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
the context will drive that, and that's to me that seems pretty obvious.
it
But I
should be.
don't.
And
But maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. And I don't know, man. I just find it funny. Actually, I find it funny that people have this opinion, and I'm working in the dark. I'm having to speculate and, you know, conjecture about, oh, well, maybe this happened to them, or maybe that happened to them, and blah blah blah. I don't know.
but I think that context is a great segue into the two other blog posts, right? And so I just read Greg's
Okay, go on then.
LinkedIn post, and I've read
Mm.
the Jade Rubik post, and
Hmm.
they need, so in both those posts they don't like they kind of move away from testing as a specialism to more of a who should be doing testing. So
Mm.
Greg talks more about the types of test management that could exist, right? No
Right,
testers,
exactly.
one tester, cute test
Right.
team,
He goes through
specialist.
the whole.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
talks about all the different scenarios that
levels.
you would have that in. But again,
Mm.
not talking about testing itself, talking about how testing might be done, right? And
Hmm.
then the Jade post, they talk about, and not to cause more confusion, but they talk about QA, should QA exist? Right. And then in their argument, they talk about automation a lot. They talk about pipelines. They talk about gates. So
they talk about automation
again,
a lot.
yeah. So again, quality assurance, like the post says, should QA exist, which is not what the argument is about. The blog post is about, should you have a QA team? Not should, quote, QA exist, which is a very different conversation to me. So like, I think that's another thing we're seeing here. Like, I know they're talking about testing being a specialism, but it feels like the argument seems to stem more from the role itself. Should there be testers? Should there be QA? And Greg and Jade nail it because they say, if I was starting out today, and this is what Jade writes, if I was starting out today, I wouldn't have any dedicated testers or QAs. I would, like they write this, they would start with developers testing, writing automated tests, building it up. However, they also write that if things started getting complicated and we didn't have the skills to automate it, we would bring somebody in. And then they also write that they like it when companies have what me and you would probably call the test jumper or the quality coach. Mm-hmm. Jade writes that they like it when that company has that model so that you can bring in that specialism when you need it. But day to day, that specialism isn't required because the level of testing that's being done on a regular basis in their context is obviously not that requiring like extensive testing, let's say. Because that's another thing, right? A lot of people just do, I don't want to say basic testing, because in every context it's good enough. So their developers are able to do good enough testing and automation without needing dedicated, specialist roles. But they both say that they would like to bring them in when they need them, which so therefore it is a specialism, just one that you perhaps don't need all the time. Don't know.
Yeah, that I think they're both making the case for having that role, that person who I like to call them like the Jason Bourne of testing, or the Jane Bourne of testing, or whatever. You just drop them into a situation, they just start, ninjaing their way through everything. It's just stuff that starts getting better. They're just a massive catalyst for things, and that's cool. I still don't think Jade's or Greg's posts answer my question, because they seem to be answering the question of what does it look like if you put. What are you giggling about?
You said Jason Bourne, right? Or I believe something like that. Yeah. And I've just read that. I remembered something from Jade's post, and it says the coaching role that they call it is a strategic roaming asset. And that, like, you just think of Bourne where it's like, take out the asset.
See? Exactly. They just go, here's the goal, and they just drop him into some city. And,
sorry, go on.
People start getting taken out. But I agree with that description. That high level description seems to match what I aspire to create with the teams that I lead, which is a team of people who serve multiple teams. They're not necessarily an IC within one specific team. They sit across a bunch of teams and they go and help them for periods of time, which is how James Back describes this test jumper, which is how people like Anne-Marie Charrett describe the quality coach role. And I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. And it's because it isn't just about that skill set is different to a pure hands-on testing specialist in a team would have some very deep hands-on testing skills. But someone in this position would also need those kind of leadership skills, those communication skills, those facilitation skills, coaching, all of that stuff on top of the testing skills, because they're trying to leverage those. Before the days of AI, I would basically describe it as they are trying to get the team to arrange themselves as almost like parallel runs of testing going on within the team. And now we're in this world of agentic work. It's the same. Trying to say, well, how can I create these different workflows of testing going on in my team? Except I'm going to use robots to do it rather than humans.
And then repeating myself again, right? But back to just what you said about the agents and the agentic and the way things are going. Again, those agents require being told what to do, which kind of takes the whole conversation full circle, right? How many of the testers out there would be very good or would have the skills to be able to articulate well enough to an agent or to an LLM to describe the work that they do to get enough value from one of these tools, right? Because I think I would struggle to do this. Well, I don't think, I know I do because I'm doing it every day, right? So I'm struggling. I'm very knowledgeable. I have a very good memory. I can remember lots of blogs and talks and things I can reference and material I can feed to the agent. But if I'm struggling, other people are going to struggle. Other testers are going to struggle. And then most definitely developers will struggle if they don't have the quote specialisms, right? So again, this idea that, yes, agents can do stuff, but they need to be, the task needs to be explained to them. We spoke about task analysis, briefly last week, or actually we never released that.
This is my point.
The internet went downhill. But we spoke about task analysis. We spoke about what does good look like, and again, I think that all those pieces of the puzzle have resulted. And it's not just people like the people that you mentioned who have posted these posts. It's been an ongoing debate for my whole career, right? 18 years in, and the debate's never gonna away. I think it'd be really fascinating just to see how much value people can get out of these agents who aren't as strong talking about testing as they perhaps should be, or QA, or QE, any of the tasks. Like,
this is the source of my curiosity, because when I imagine the work that these folks are doing in this agentic landscape, this agentic era that we are in, it implies a bunch of things that I don't think are actually true. So if they're saying testing is not a specialism, what does that mean practically speaking when they're building their agentic workflows? Do they not have any mention of what good looks like in their skills MDs files? Is it a topic that doesn't come up as they are, I'm doing air quotes, coaching, specifying what they want from their agent? Does testing ever come up?
100% it does.
I know that. I know that it does. That was a rhetorical 100%. Question. I know that Nailed it does. There's zero chance, literally zero chance, that when people are building with agents and agentic workflow, that they do not dedicate time and space to the question of, here's what good looks like when you implement the thing. Or they are looking for evidence that the agent has tried to answer that question. Yep. There's zero chance that they're not doing that. Zero. Right? So why would you say it's not a specialism then? What is it when you're having those conversations and specifying those things in your work? What do you think you're doing?
Again, I think it's twofold, right? I think a big part of the argument is that they whatever the fancy word you used before, they confuse the activity with the specialism, right? That is 100% part of the equation. Secondly, again, I think the level of testing that needs to be done in some contexts is not that complicated or not that difficult, or doesn't have to be that good, right? To satisfy the quality criteria that exists. Therefore, you could argue I don't need a specialist, but it doesn't stop it being, a specialism. But it does pose an interesting question. So not to side with them, but just for the sake of the conversation. if someone with deep understanding of testing, oh, it was very dramatic zoom in there.
It's my Mac has started working again, which is amazing. Sorry, go on.
If someone, a group of people, a company, or whoever built a very, let's say 50% of an industry standard tester. I know we can't measure that, right? It's nonsense what I just said because no idea what that means, right? But like, if you took, basically, I'm just trying to say, like, if you took an average person in a tester role, right? Because there's still a lot of people who are just, I say just like it's a bad thing. It's their context, right? They're writing test cases, they're executing test cases, they're logging bugs, right? No automation, no leadership, no glue work, no knowledge work, no coaching going on. They write test cases, they execute test cases. I don't think that's one of the most challenging parts of being a tester or a QA. So if these agents existed and they were good enough in certain scenarios, it does pose the question of what happens to the testers and the QAs, right? Because I think both these blogs are aimed at the role. I don't think they're aimed at the specialism. The specialism is a specialism regardless, right? I think most people listening will agree. But I think they're
if you're
aiming
talking
it at
about
the roles.
Greg and Jade, I agree. I don't know about
Paul. I am.
Yeah.
I don't know about Paul either, but I get the sense that, I've seen other things from Paul that talk about testers and automators and things like this, right? But it is going to be really challenging, I think, going forward. If you can't, not aimed at you, right? But if people listening, if you can't explain your specialism to people, and you can't explain why you're better than, let's quote, an average tester. I don't know what that means, right? But people listening, make up your own judgment
Just
of what an average tester is, right? If you can't explain why you're better than that, and you can't explain why you're better than an agent, and you can't write your own agents because you can't explain what good looks like, or how you test, or why you test, or why did Vernon think of this test case and not that test case, or that test idea? Why is Richard automating his test with this pattern and not that pattern? Right, all these little nuggets of knowledge that we've built up, someone now has to dissect all that and turn it into agents. Well, they don't have to. People are doing it already, right? People are going to keep doing that. But who are they using? What nuggets of knowledge are they taking? And is it good? Is it good to how I view good? Is it good to how you view good? Is it good enough for 80% of the industry? And hypothetically, if that is true, what does happen to the specialist role? Specialism's not gone away, but what does happen to the specialist role? Because it really is fascinating times. And again, I'm not picking on testers with this, because we're talking about it. You could very much argue the same for, I've seen other people argue the same for junior developers. But then the argument becomes, well, where do the seniors come from if we don't start having juniors again, right? So who's training this stuff? So yeah, exactly. So I don't agree with them. But I do think it is interesting times for what happens to the specialist roles and how many of them will be needed, given the fact that I think a lot of the specialist roles aren't doing very specialist work.
Here's the thing. By that, the problem I have with that perspective is, by that definition, every role literally is a specialism. Every role, including development.
Yes.
And so,
however,
we're going to get to a point where this is where the conversation gets big, deep, because what are we saying? We're creating a situation where nobody will have to work. And then what does that look like? And that extends beyond the scope of this podcast. Right. But if nobody is in a role because the AI is good at law, medicine, software development, like anything and everything, and the vast majority of people working in an economy that takes out 99% of them. What are those people going to be doing anyway? And that's not a testing question. That's a societal question.
Yeah.
If that is the goal.
But to put it to keep it in software development, right? Because I'm going to be vulnerable a minute and share where I do think it is going, which is so I work in a consultancy, right? So at a consultancy anyway, you're almost kind of expected to wear many hats, right? And we've spoken about this in the past about wearing many hats. Is it going to become easier to wear many hats? So I have a lot of basic testing skills in my head, right? That I actually do believe I could turn into an agent now. I couldn't have turned them into a tool before because they needed the nuance of understanding the context that I'm working in. So I needed it to be tailored to understanding the words I'm giving it, which we couldn't do with generic tools before. But now we can. So what I'm trying to say is, can I, as an engineer or a person on a software team, can I do more now than I could before across all these specialisms? If I'm given a suite of tools that do things good enough.
Are you asking me if you can do more?
Yeah, I was asking you. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do more.
But you were talking about roles disappearing, right? I think I don't think the specialist roles go. I think you will. My opinion is you're almost going to be forced to wear many hats now, and you will have no choice.
I'm talking about beyond that. If the people who are hyping up AI are to be believed, and if what they're saying is true, even that will become unnecessary. Because why? You wouldn't need it. You just get the robots.
I get that. But I mean, right now in the current
right now
direction things
are going. I think right now there's this concept called skill stacking, right? Where, and again, this is not. If you compare, let's say, I don't even know. I'm trying to think of a non-software example before I talk about a software example. So a non-software example might be a lawyer. You've got a lawyer who knows their area of law, let's say family law. But then they also add this skill of business building or entrepreneurship. They also add this skill of public speaking. They also add this skill of social media, social posting, content marketing. That person with that skill set has the potential for much larger impact than the person who knows the law without the other things that are built on top. And I think the same applies in our field, whether you want to start off from a developer point of view or a software testing point of view. Let's go with software testing, because why wouldn't we? Right? So you got someone who knows software testing, but then someone who also knows how to write code, add that skill, the ability to write code. Well, not even write code, actually. I would say understand code. Let's start there. And then they have the ability to write code on top of that. Oh, and then they have the ability to coach people in testing. And then they have the ability to lead. And then they have do you know what I mean? Like that person is infinitely more impactful than the person who's focused on interacting with the product by learning about it. And as you said quite directly earlier on in the conversation, that splits out into a same kind of thing. You've got people at the bottom who are able to, and I said the bottom deliberately, right? Because we talked about in the last episode, it might be the one that did get recorded, but we need to go back and re-record that. Because the problem is, if your value add and your addition, your contribution to what the business is trying to do is to write test cases, good luck for 2026. Same on the development side. If your value proposition to the business is, I know how to write code, and that really is it. I know how to write code, and that's how you market it. You're going to have a hard time in 2026. Because I think all of these people who hold the purse strings, once they get a taste of, and I'm not even getting to the right or wrong of it, right? I'm just saying, once your leadership team get a taste of, I can use this thing to generate 3, 4, 5, 10 times the output of what we're currently doing. I want more of that, please. That's happening. That's just the way it goes. It's horrible. It's grim. But they are going to go for it. Those conversations are already happening. You can already see Jack Dorsey from Block is already trying to justify his position with a post I started reading of his recently.
Yeah.
And he will not be the only one.
I agree. But like, I to attempt to try and wrap it up, right? Because I think that, they're wrong about it not being a specialism. It definitely is. What I find interesting about where things are going, and I don't have data to back this up, right?
It's an opinion.
12 10, 12 years ago, right? We were all told, we weren't all told, right? But the whole noise was about automating, right? You want to stay in testing, you got to start automating, right? And some people took to that, some people didn't take to that. And then a few years after that, or maybe 4 or 5, it was all about leadership and quality and coaching. And that was the next push, right? And some people had already done the automation bit, right? And then they went and added quality on top, or like leadership and stuff, because they'd done this bit, right? I've nailed that skill set now. I'm going to do this bit now. Some people didn't do that bit. And people were then saying recently, you've got, you don't need to learn how to write tests anymore, because you just get an agent to do that. You know how to design a test. So those people might be feeling like, oh, well, I skipped that, need to learn to code. I can now just use all these agents. And you can, to an extent, right? If you know what good looks like. But I almost feel now that we're on that next cusp again now. And I don't know what it is, but you mentioned all the other specialisms that don't get questioned. It will undoubtedly be one of them. You will have to start writing production code. Now, if you skipped the coding bit, right, and now you're just using AI to write playwright tests for you, you're not going to be able to do the coding bit. Or you might move into more of an engineering manager-esque direction, right, where you're more orchestrating people and agents maybe. But I almost feel we're on that next wave now. And it's also the dangerous thing that I feel about this is, and I'm being frank, like being honest, I am the person who learned everything, right? So I feel quite comfortable in this wave. I don't feel comfortable in that my company won't just turn around and be like, half the team made redundant, right? But I feel comfortable in the think that I can continue to get work. I don't know what that would look like, but I'm a very skilled engineer, so I feel comfortable there. But I do generally have fear for, as you just said, people who didn't make some of those seismic moves into the people side or the tech side, and to know what good looks like and to get the most out of these agents. So you need to know what good looks like. And I think it's going to be a real challenge for people. Like,
I think it's going to be. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I think it's going to be a real challenge, especially because people are viewing these agents as all superpowering, right? And as someone who's got nearly a year and a half hands-on now, they are not as good as people think, right? You have to put in so much graft and write so many words to try and get them to do things 50, 60% of how good you can do them. But it is, my own stance of this is, I'm not 10 times quicker like these other people say, right? But I'm probably 4 or 5 times quicker than
that's still seismic.
I used to be. But it's not this what people think. It's not, hey, write tests for me. Hey, write this code for me. Hey, here's a Jira ticket, implement it. Here's a code base, refactor it. It's nothing like that at all. Like the amount of knowledge I've built up over the years is now enabling me to do that. But you mentioned earlier about that other person. I'm a public speaker. I was a blogger. I was good at social media. I'm good at reflection. So I've done a lot of that work to almost know what good looks like. And I'm not saying I'm amazing, but I don't think a lot of people have. I don't think people have stopped a lot in their careers to reflect on the skills they have. And that is now necessary.
Yeah, I think it's mandatory. I think this is what my next newsletter will be on this topic, right? Around roles and skills. Because my opinions around roles and skills are, you said something like it was something about knowing how to code, and now everyone's got these skills in their generalists or something along those lines, right?
Kind of that people who skip the coding bit might now believe that they can just talk plain English to an agent and get the same value and the same level that I will get.
Here's the thing. Right. Here's the thing. Those people are doing that already. There are people, and I'll include the link to this, although it might be behind a paywall, but there's a newsletter that I subscribe to on Substack by a guy called Nate B. Jones. Shout out Martin Hinier, put me onto that. And he had a post going back a month or two ago where he talked about there are going to be 3 different tracks potentially for a developer to go down. One of those tracks was something like Domain Translator or something like that. So it was somebody that, let's say, knows the domain of the law. So they know what it means to be a good solicitor or a barrister or whatever, whichever flavor of lawyer it is. And they know enough about the tech of AI, and they know enough about just enough about what a technical solution looks like to start using these tools like an absolute champion. Everybody is that person now, basically, has the potential to be that person. And
absolutely,
I think, So what, the reason I bring it up is because testers usually are in a situation where our domain expertise is testing itself, but we have to go. Today, I work for a localization platform in terms of my 9 to 5, my day job, right? Before that, I worked for a health tech company. Before that, I worked for, let's just call it a banking company. So banking, health tech, localization. That's crazy. Like that, there's no link there. It's all testing. So what you have to do is, as a tester generally, is go in, learn the domain, and then you can apply your testing skills on top. What people are now coming with now is they come with the domain knowledge, and then they add the AI stuff on top, and then they start, you have some people build out businesses and practices and, offerings to the market. Say, oh, well, I'm a lawyer. I can help you practice law more efficiently because I understand AI and how to deploy that in your business, for example. Or you might do that as a 9 to 5 full-time employee. It doesn't matter. It's just in that context, that person could probably be more effective than you or I because we haven't learned the domain yet. What we're bringing is the technical know-how, but we need to learn the domain. But they already have the domain and they know enough to be dangerous with and I think that's the world that we're in right now. And I don't know how long that's going to last for. But I think that's the world we're in right now, where everyone is kind of been, or potentially has the opportunity to be empowered, or maybe that's not the right word, boosted, amplified.
Yeah. Well, you can do things you wouldn't have been able to do before. You would have had to go and spend months, years learning these things. And you don't need to anymore. But anyway, we should wrap this up. We should definitely wrap it up.
Well, I do not have an answer to my question, as of course I could not have an answer to my question because the people are not here. But we've had a good chat.
Well, I have a conclusion, honestly, which is,
once again, I really want to hear what people think.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
I think that we definitely know it's a specialism. Everyone will agree. We're definitely in agreement that in some contexts you don't need a specialist, right? That's a given. The specialisms that people are saying they don't need, they're doing them anyway, just other people are doing them. And I think going forward is most definitely going to see a big shift in the amount of software delivery tasks that you're going to be expected to do going forward. And I don't know what that looks like, just like you said. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it's going to be, but you're either going to be expected to produce 5-10 times more throughput than you currently do, or you're going to be expected to use some of the knowledge that you just mentioned that people have picked up over the years and start using it to provide value in roles that are outside of your specialism. I think that is fact and happening and going to accelerate at such a pace.
I just think all of that is already happening. It's not like I don't think people should hear what we're talking about and kind of say, oh, this is going to happen in the next month or two. It's already happening. The demands.
So how is it
being
impacting
placed
you?
on
As
people,
you said,
the demands being placed on people since last year for sure, at least. A director of engineering, for example, is now expected to be hands-on in the code in a way that they were not expected to be hands-on in the code before. And that supply, just as an example, for people leaders, they're expected to be people leaders and to be hands-on in whatever their, area of expertise is. That's already a thing. So what we're not talking about is, oh, this is going to happen, but it's not happening yet. We're saying it's already happening and it's going to increase.
Yeah.
Those changes are going to manifest themselves more and more and more. And I'm going to be writing about this, hopefully this weekend, with the hope of posting it Monday, Tuesday, about this very topic, about what are the skills, what are the roles that testers. It's on Substack. My newsletter is called Yeah, But Does It Work? And I'm trying to post more consistently there this year. Still haven't hit the rate that I'm looking for, but I find it, at least what I'm writing about right now, I'm finding that it's taken me a long time to write a newsletter. so I'm trying to do it weekly, but bloody hell, it's taking ages. So I'm going to write there and I'm going to post it there. And I'll probably have a separate post specifically about the question that we've been talking about in this episode of the podcast around specialism. What makes something a specialism? What might these people be thinking, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, catch me there.
Well, look out for that. And please share thoughts, comments, how you're being impacted, what you're thinking of doing, what's your strategy, everything, whatever. Share it, tag us, and we want to read it because I think we're in this weird space of change right now, and the more insights we get from other people, the better.
Sorry, just real quickly, what I would really appreciate from anybody who listens to this is if you could run my question past any friendly developers in your life. Say, what is the issue with treating testing as a specialism? Yeah. Please, because I'd like to get their insights, and I'm going to go and hassle all the developers in my life for answers. Cool.
All right.
I shall now
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. Take it easy. Bye.